What's up YouTube, Capital G here, talking the forbidden and limited list in this video and asking the question, why does Konami or Konami, why do they do such a poor job of restoring past archetypes to full strength? Why do they keep them fractured for so long? Or in some cases, just like, why don't they do it at all? And I thought about this for a long time. I've spoken about this issue on this channel at least once before, but I'm starting to think that there is an ulterior motive there. I'm starting to think that they're not just oblivious idiots. I'm starting to think that they do it for the sake of pushing new products, for the sake of selling, the newer archetypes and the new booster sets. Now, I don't want to be a conspiracy theorist here, but I'm going to make some points and some opinions on why I believe that is. And for starters, I'll ask, why does this not happen in the OCG? Why does it only happen in the TCG? Because, would you believe me if I told you, I've got Insectors, Heroes, Windups, and a deck like Infernity, or excuse me, archetype like Infernity up here. All of these obviously have had a lot of their cards hit, but would you believe me if I told you that this is at 3, 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 and this is at 3 in the OCG? Like almost all of the cards on the screen that are either at 1 are banned, like mostly all of them are at 3 in the OCG. So it really makes me wonder, well, why is it only an issue in the TCG as opposed to the OCG? And you would think, I'm not trying to get too ignorant here, but you would think because of like cultural differences that the TCG would be a lot more liberal. I'm just going to use North America as an example because that's where I live, even though the TCG does incorporate obviously Europe and Australia, etc., around the world. But you would think because of the cultural differences that they would be more conservative in Japan, thus they would want cards to be hit longer. And in the TCG, we would be more liberal. We'd be unbanning things a lot faster and we'd be having a lot more unbanned cards. But it's like it's the complete opposite, especially with archetype cards. The reason I focus on archetype cards is because, archetypes are what this game kind of revolves around now. Ever since kind of like the Zeal era, this has been an archetype specific game. So I feel like restoring archetypes should definitely be prioritized over even restoring things like Trishula. Like it's fun to have Trishula, but it's more fun to have something like Windups where it's like, wow, we got an entirely tier 1 deck that we can now play and we can infuse into the meta. Now, I constantly thought about this, and I don't want to give Konami the excuse anymore that they're just oblivious and that they just don't realize this. Like, I think that they realize that some of these archetypes could potentially steal the spotlight from newer ones. I mean, everybody knows that Elemental Heroes have one of the biggest followings ever, and a prime example of this is Blackwings. Blackwings were a deck that's, in my personal opinion, and I could back it up with evidence if I looked into all the ban lists, I think that Blackwings were a deck that they were definitely powerful, and they were definitely a deck when during like the Synchro Cat era or whatever, when Lightsworn and Synchro Cat essentially got wrecked, Blackwings became defaultly the best deck, and Blackwings were already extremely high on the tier list anyways. And little by little, Konami started picking their stuff out, like, okay, Blackwings, you're a little too strong now, we need to take away some of your whirlwinds, we need to hit Kalut, Gale has to go to 1, etc., etc. But then it was like they kind of went out of their way to go overboard with Blackwings. Like, they ended up hitting Kalut the 1 in like the TCG, and it was like, how did that make, like, that never made sense. Whirlwind went the 1, and it's almost like they intentionally made the deck near unplayable. And I know why they did it in the OCG. I assume it's the same reason in the TCG. They did it in the OCG because fans were they were just infatuated with Blackwings. I would even go as far as to say that Blackwings are the most beloved and popular archetype of all time. I say that because, you look at how many Blackwing support cards there have been. I mean, shit, this is a 5Ds archetype, and Shining Victories, we're getting new Blackwing cards for fucking sake. You look at the fact that there is a character on the anime that's been reintroduced into the anime, Crow, just for the sake of making new Blackwing cards, etc., etc. So it's like Blackwings were being played so much in the OCG that fans were just, they weren't even playing the new cards. They were just like, yo, as long as Blackwings are playable, we don't need to get any new cards. We'll just keep playing these. And Konami was like, okay, fuck it. We're just going to make this deck unplayable so that you guys have to invest in some new cards. And I feel like that's largely why Elemental Hero Stratos was banned in the TCG. because, Konami wanted to push other archetypes, and they saw Stratos as kind of like a figure for Elemental Heroes, and they knew that they wouldn't be able to adequately push these new archetypes if Stratos was standing in the way, still having people wanting to play Elemental Hero Stratos. And that's why I think the ulterior motives comes in, for not wanting cards like, or not wanting decks like Insectors or Windups to be put back at full strength. Like, I'm just going to give you a hypothetical and you can come to your own conclusions. We know that Konami has already come out and said via their official Konami blog that we can expect a new full ban list for anywhere from 3 to 7 weeks from now. Now, if you're on the latter side of that, 7 weeks, well, we'll probably be preparing right around, well, we will definitely be preparing for Shining Victory's sneak peek right about that time. Do you think that if they decided to say, okay, we're gonna take Dragonfly, we're gonna put that at 3, we're gonna put Hornet at 3, we're gonna basically do everything that the OCG did, where now you've got all of these decks that are definitely fully playable, do you think that that possibly could sway some of the attention away from the cards that are in Shining Victories, like some of the decks like the Amorphomages or the new Blue Eye support that's supposed to be, in there because of the movie and whatnot? Like, I think it would definitely take away from some of the hype that is coming with that set, and I think that it could definitely potentially hurt their sales. I mean, if I'm like a player who played during the time that these decks were great, I'm definitely going to be interested in potentially looking into these, and Konami doesn't make any money off of the sales of these cards unless they decide to reprint these, and usually they have to do that for like, they would probably have to make like some adjusted rarities, like, okay, we're going to print Windup Magician as like an ultimate, or we're gonna make a card like Dragonfly an ultra rare in some type of pack or something like that. I definitely think that there's potential for there to be some revenue loss from the newer set, because people would definitely try and pick these decks up because of like nostalgia, or the fact that newer players who maybe started like during the Arc V era, they never got to play these decks at full power. They've never seen what a full power Windup deck can be and what it can do. I think that there'd be people who want to play these because maybe they missed the opportunity to play these when the decks were powerful. Like me, yeah, sure, I definitely played, Insectors when they were extremely powerful, but I never really got to play Windups when they were at full strength. So, I don't know what it feels like to really play a full Windup deck, even though there wouldn't be like Shockmaster and all that good stuff. So I think that it could divert some attention away from the newer sets, and the TCG especially. Konami has to push not only the entire OCG set, but then they have to try and sell the TCG exclusive archetype to us too. Things like Cosmos and Ultra Athletes and Kaijus, like those are their own creations that they somehow have to get us interested in buying as well. And it's like, you could say, well, Cap, how come they don't do, like, how come it's not an issue in the OCG? Wouldn't there be the same problem there? The reason that I don't think that it's as big of a deal in the OCG, and why I think that they can do this, they can have these decks at full power, they can kind of restore archetypes that they hit a lot faster and know that it won't affect the sales of the booster packs, is in the OCG, things are coming out for the first time. So, like, you can look at a deck on paper and try and get an opinion, say, well, this deck is going to be really good, this deck's going to just be okay, but you can never really know how powerful a deck is going to be just by looking at it without actually picking the cards up and playing it. You know what I mean? Like, look at Burning Abyss. Did anybody think that deck, even just out of the gate with Mathematician and Graph, Dante, Seer, and Skarm, just with like 4 cards, and I guess Mathematician and Traveler, which I don't even think anybody played, like just with like 5 cards to their name, nobody thought that Burning Abyss could be like a tier 1 deck, because just what we saw on paper, and then we ended up playing, it's like, oh my god, this shit is ridiculous. So in the OCG, they're kind of inclined, I would assume, to try and pick up everything just to play it and test it. But in the TCG, we kind of already know with the OCG support, like we know what's going to be good and what's not going to be good. When Breaker of Shadows came out, or previous to that, we already knew that when Performa Pals eventually got Joker, when they got Sorcerer, when they got Guitar Turtle and Monkey Board, like the deck was going to be real as fuck. So I mean, we also knew that Dino Mist were gonna be kind of a niche deck. Maybe you have to build it a certain way to get the best results, but we knew it was not gonna fuck with decks like Monarchs, or it wasn't gonna be on the level of like Performages and Pals. So when what we have in the TCG is we already have kind of like a head start on the meta, because we can look at the OCG, we can see what's topping, and we can say, all right, going into this booster pack, X, Y, and Z are the cards that we need to potentially try and get. And I just think that Konami, they're probably in a position where they're just like, we never really want to risk it, especially now that ban lists kind of come out whenever the fuck they want them to come out. You know what I mean? I think if they release them towards the time that they're going to release a booster pack, I don't think that they ever want the ban list to try or to potentially steal away the hype of what's going to be in the actual booster sets themselves. And I think that if they did these massive overhauls, like, okay, we're going to put Insectors back at full freaking strength, I think that, you know, there might be a decent amount of people that says, okay, well, I'm just gonna play Insectors because they're gonna be budget and because they're gonna still be pretty decent. Like, it can even be false hope, it can even be hype, but it's been shown in the past when they have done it with decks like Fire Fist. You know what I mean? Remember when they put Fire Fist and they put like Spirit back at 3? How many people like instantly were like, yo, Fire Fist is gonna be so good? And I think that maybe they learned from that. So you guys let me know, do you think that there is some ulterior motives? Because, you know, I don't think that Konami's dumb. I don't think that anybody with like their head on right, I don't think anybody with any common sense or any brain in their head actually looks at a card like Stratos and like, nope, card's way too broken, bro. It's way too broken. You know what I mean? If we put Insectors back at full strength, they would just destroy Performages and Pals. Like, it would be tier 0. So I don't want to give them that out anymore. I don't want to give them the fact that they're oblivious. I think that they know that heroes are extremely popular. I think that they know that there are some of these legacy decks like Heroes and Lightsworn and Blackwings that are just going to kind of be like popular forever. And I know that they, or excuse me, I think that they know that if they ended up doing some of these, that it could put even a smallest dent into some of the new products. The only exception would probably be a deck like Infernity, because even though in the OCG, again, Infernity's kind of at full strength because this and this are at 3. I just think in the TCG, Konami just hates Infernity. Like, I think that if you look at Infernity and the multiple versions of how the deck has been played, whether it's been the synchro version at the beginning of like, or during what was it, Shining Darkness, with like the whole 100 Eyes looping, you know, you end up with like Doom Dragon and like 3 Bear. I don't think they like that version of the deck. I don't think they like the turn 1 Trishula you like 5 times version. I don't even think that they like the XC version that ended up getting Lavalval banned, and that version was just like, all right, we're just gonna keep throwing Exitons at you until you eventually run out of cards. Then we'll just soul charge all that shit back and win. And just on a side note, I will say this, if Konami puts Infernity back at full strength, it doesn't even need to have 3 launcher, but if it had 3, this deck would fucking destroy Pepe. As long as it had Lavalval Chain and Exiton Knight, I think it would destroy Pepe, because I just don't. I'm trying to think of what you could make turn 1 with Pepe that would hurt this deck. Like, if you make a Rafflesia, like, that's not gonna do it. They're just gonna keep throwing Exitons at you until you don't have an answer. And since you don't play traps, you only have like, you have your 1 Rafflesia and your 1 Treacherous, and like, they can just Exiton through that shit, and then basically you lose your Pendulum Scales, and then they'll just Soul Charge or they'll launch all their shit back, and then they'll just wall up with barriers and you'll lose. So I think that it would be so fun if Infernity like came back to full strength, but I think there's no chance, because I think Konami just hates. It's like they created their own. It's like they hate their own creation. Like, he's like the Frankenstein of Yu-Gi-Oh. But anyways, not to get off topic, guys. Let me know. Do you guys think that there is an ulterior motive here, and why Konami doesn't restore these decks to full power, or why it takes so fucking long? Because I'm looking at windups, I'm like, yo, I would really like to play windups with like 3 Mighty and 3 Magician. Like, why the fuck is Magician at 1 right now, especially with there being no Mighty? I don't want to have to wait 8 years, you know what I mean, until we're in Yu-Gi-Oh! X and there's some like stupidly ridiculously power creeped mechanic, and we're finally, I was like, okay, well, Magician's finally back at 3, Cap. Go play your windups now. So thank you guys for watching as always.